I want to talk about, the work that I have found probably most interesting and certainly most moving and most harrowing in my life. And I've been a psychotherapist for nearly 20 years, I'd say. I don't know how long. And I've seen all sorts of different people in different levels of pain that, is often indescribable. And then 5 years ago, when I met the parents in March 2020, this was just when COVID happened, and I started. Joe was so very helpful at the time, and another woman called Carol, and they'd kind of asked me to run parent meetings before, and I'd said, yeah, I'd love to, I'm way too busy. Then COVID happened, and I said, yeah, I'll give it a go, not knowing that my life was changing on that decision. And we started those meetings in March 2020, March, April, we started organising them in March. And we've had over 10,000 attendances to those meetings. And I'll never forget those first few months when parents would come in. They were coming in like they were coming out of shipwreck. They really were. They were coming into the meetings just in shock about what was happening. And their children were highly troubled children. And they were mostly mothers, so the data, we're going to one day, there is some posters outside and you can have a look at it. Mostly mothers, strikingly so, and if you read the poster outside you'll see fathers prefer practical problem-solving approaches rather than the emotional support that we offer in Beyond Trans. At the time we called it the Gender Dysphoria Support Network. It depended, we had all sorts of meetings. We had meetings for kids under 15, parents of kids under 15, parents of kids over 15, parents of kids of boys, parents of kids of girls, parents of kids who were under 15. We had to divide it because the meetings were too big. And so we were constantly, at first I said I'll do 1 a week, then 2 a week, almost immediately, then 3 a week. And I'll never forget that first meeting. And I came down, Henry was downstairs by the fire, and I came down and I was shook. And I don't get shook because I'm used to my work and I'm used to hearing harrowing stories. And there was tears in my eyes, and I was like, I've just seen something. This is something huge is happening here. I knew it, but I didn't know it. You know the way you can kind of know it, but you didn't. It was the devastation of the parents who were like, my kids have got wrapped up into something, and next week he's getting his penis removed, and he is lost, and he is confused, and he needs help, proper help. And the doctor, I remember one image, I'm sure you've heard me say it before, but it always stayed with me. She said the doctor, it was like a scene in a movie when it turned out the doctor was the villain, and he kind of removed his mask because he said, oh yeah, he does have to get his penis removed. Do you know what I mean? It was like this shocking moment. And so those meetings, as it says there, from all those different countries, all over the world. We try to do them in different times. They continue. I've long ago moved on, and I started Genspect as a result of those meetings a year later, in June 2021. But they continue, and Jo is just an absolute hero, an unsung hero, and she organised this entire conference, and she organises these meetings. She just does so much work. It's hard to quantify how much work she does, and how well and how gracefully she does it. But like it says, you can see the different times. Actually, that one at Wednesday at 5 a.m. in that's for the Australians. It's not necessarily just because we have it in Eastern time doesn't mean that all the. But we've loads. As you can see, we've got parents of desisters, because the parents of desisters are traumatised. Their worldview has shook. They say, I'll never again trust the institutions in my life again. I don't trust people. I've lost friends and I will never make friends with those people again. They told me that my child should get a mastectomy even though they knew my child was lost and needed help. There's parents in crisis. I often facilitate those ones, but usually these meetings are peer-to-peer. These are just parent-run, very much kind of on the model of AA and Al-Anon, as in peer-to-peer. And that's why they can be free. And parents of medicalised children who've already medicalised, because sometimes being with the ones who haven't medicalised is difficult for both, if you follow me. A parent might come in saying, thank God they haven't medicalised, and the next parent said, well, mine has. Do you know what I mean? So it's nice to have a space for parents whose children have medicalised, because you go into a different mental space when your child has changed. You know what I mean? And as one of the quotes from the poster outside, and I do urge you to have a look at the posters, one of the mothers said, I just look at her eyes. It's the only thing that hasn't changed. Her voice has changed, her face has changed. She's got, facial hair, her body has changed, but her eyes haven't changed. So I just focus on her eyes, So it's pretty just devastating. And then there's parents of estranged children. There's also bereaved parents, because there is a lot of profound trauma and there is suicide. And I know it's not exalted and it's not, higher than other distressed groups, which it isn't, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And when that happens, that can be very, very devastating. So then a year later, after starting Genspect, I started the Beyond Trans project. And the idea was we did a detrans awareness day in March, and we still run it every year. And we made about 10,000 from that event, and we put that money into therapy for detransitioners, and it was kind of offering them one-to-one therapy, because we knew since we started Genspect how many of these kids really needed, the detransitioners needed help, they needed therapy, and nobody was giving it to them because they had all these captured clinicians who were saying, well, what pronoun are you? And the person would just kind of say, I can't deal with you, And so we provided one-to-one therapy. We've since ran out of funding for that, and so instead we offer free therapist facilitation. Myself, I do it, and Evelyn Ball does it, and we just offer kind of free therapist facilitated online meetings. And this is the work that I find is probably the most harrowing, but also most moving, and probably the most helpful work I've ever done in my life. I kind of feel this is where I can really make a difference in life, We also have a directory of therapists, and we do advocacy. So if somebody wants to, for example, let's say a detransitioner will say, I'm working in a school, they're shoving gender ideology down my throat, they don't know I'm a detransitioner, what will I do? So we might do some advocacy for that detransitioner to speak to their workplace or whatever, so that they could kind of be helped navigate it, because it's not easy being a detransitioner. It's a weird position to be in life when people don't understand it. So many of, let's say, the women who born female, FTMTF as they call it, born female, transitioned to male and went back to female. And so many of them, when they try to say that they're a detrans woman, the person says, oh, you're a trans woman, oh, right, yeah. And they completely misunderstand it, and it's very hurtful. Because they're like, no, I'm not a male and I haven't transitioned. I'm a female who looks quite male because of testosterone. And I consider myself a victim of medical abuse. But you didn't hear anything except the word trans, and now you're calling me a trans woman, and the whole staff room is calling me a trans woman. So that can be very devastating. So it's very important. I'm very engaged in this information to kind of get it out. We've had over 600 meetings. We've over 480 service users of our meetings. We have roughly 3 to 4 meetings per week. I facilitate 2 of them. Evelyn does another one, and we have other therapists who cover the other ones. And we want to run more, so if you're interested in volunteering for free, we don't have money for this program at all, but I think it's actually very important work and it's worth doing. As you can see, a snapshot of the work I've done, I do 2 meetings. One of the meetings is on a Sunday, and it's just detransitioners only. And on the Saturday, it's an open meeting, and this is where I think it's kind of modelled on the As Hakim from back in the early 2000s. This is where the real important, I think, future of how we may be able to connect with these kids, because I just saw over the years so many therapists were working with ROGD kids. They weren't getting through to those kids. The failure rate is really quite high. They go to the therapist, they don't go back, and they go off and medicalise in very high numbers. So getting them to a good therapist isn't working on a lot of levels. It is sometimes, but it also isn't. So it's only for over 18s. This service, and what it is it's open to anybody who identifies as trans, who has already medicalised, who is ambivalent about their medical transition, or who has detransitioned. So anybody of that spectrum comes to the Saturday meeting. It's called an open meeting, and you can see here, it's extraordinary how many are same-sex attracted. So out of an N of 91, you can see the numbers there. Now, I don't harass anybody to kind of tell me their sexual attraction. So I'm just taking the data down as they disclose it. I'm not asking it. But if it comes up and stuff like that, I think it's very important data. And they know I'm taking data because this is an unresearched group. And so I do take it. So this slide is quite interesting. These are the people who disclosed, and you can see, 56% are lesbian, 28% are gay, 10 are heterosexual, and about 5 are bisexual. And of the bisexuals, they're all male. Which I think that's all quite interesting data, if you can see it. You can see with the females, 95% of the females in the groups are lesbian. These are extraordinary data. And I didn't expect that. I thought, yeah, same-sex attracted, it's a big issue. I didn't think in my detrans meetings it was going to be that high. And so that's kind of made me think, are they the ones who are coming to the meetings? Are they the ones who are detransitioning? What is that? Because these numbers are very, very, like I say, you can see them out in the poster later on and take photos of them. But there's some startling information in this data that I would really like to call to attention to, because I would like to see more research on this, because I don't see that. I don't see much people talking about these extremely high figures. For example, at the male, 68, like let's say 69% are gay, 19% are heterosexual, and 12% are bisexual. So, if you put it together, then you're talking kind of, 70, 80, 81, 82% are same-sex attracted of the males. It's extraordinary, really. Very high number of comorbidities, a lot of very serious challenges like alcohol abuse, rehab, schizophrenia, sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse. There's a lot of all of that is in these groups. Like I say, only over 18. Interesting, you'll be really surprised by the numbers I'm going to show you in a minute. Well, you'll be all agog in my mind. If you're as obsessed with this issue as I am, you'll be really interested. But when you think of the ages, we have it open from 18. I thought I was going to see a lot of people in their 20s and a few in their 30s. Actually, in fact, in our groups, it goes from age 18 to 85. That's the oldest detransitioner in our group. So, when you look at the status of the people in this, like I say, it's a snapshot of the meetings I'm facilitating at, that I've taken down the data. Nearly half disclose their age of medical transition. So some of them haven't, and some of them haven't disclosed. And some people just listen. Some people come into the meetings and they just listen, and I don't make them talk. I don't shine a light on them. I'm delighted that they're there, and I know how moving it is. But some started as early as their teens, but some started in their 40s, and I didn't expect that. And there's a good deal more. You'll see in the data I'm about to show you, there's a good deal more. Of the people who are coming to these open meetings on a Saturday, 63% have stopped their medical transition. So you could call them detransitioners, arguably. Nearly 9% are just regretful. They're saying, I've transitioned, it's too much havoc to go back. I can't go back. I've had a vaginoplasty, I've had this, I've had that. I can't go back. And so I'm just going to stay in regret and work with the cards I have. And I think actually that's a very valid and not many people are talking about the regretters who are like, I don't believe any of it. It was an absolute disaster. I wish I didn't do it. But now I'm here. Should I actually go back? Fascinating philosophical conversation, because you could say, well, you're maintaining something psychologically that's just going to cause you an awful lot of distress. Maybe you're in an arc of detransition and you're going to eventually come around. Like I say, new data that I think we need to really think about that. Nearly 9% are ambivalent. So they come to the meetings and they're kind of going, I'm questioning. And I'm like, yeah, I would say they're on an arc of detransition. Quite a few have come to our meetings starting with, I'm just questioning, I'm just interested in what happens. And then a few months later, I am so detransitioned. I am over this. So this does happen. They're a really lovely, lovely group of people, and I do love this work. It doesn't charm me that I have them on at the weekends, and I think I'll change that, but I love the work, and I have such a fondness for these people in these groups. I just feel we're in something special together, just like I had with the parents back in the day. We were in something together and we were getting somewhere with it. Nearly 19% of the people in these groups are thinking, and some of these, oh, by the way, some of the members of the groups are here today. I'm delighted. There's Johnny over there. He's going to be talking to me later, but there's a few of them there, so I'm delighted. But nearly 19% have never medicalised. And everybody in the groups, as you can imagine, there's a feeling of us all thinking, You know, because let's say, for example, a kid comes in and they're 19 years old and they say, you know, my transphobic, bigoted parents won't use my pronouns. And then the next person is 3 years older and say, you know, I transitioned and, you know, now I have chronic pain and it was the worst decision of my life. The previous speaker is kind of suddenly sitting up straight, kind of going, you know what I mean? Like, it's much more serious. We're out of junior infants now. We're going into kind of serious territory. So it's very, very, I would say, important they meet. Now, if you look like the scintillating data, the age to begin transition, the youngest in the groups is 13. The oldest, are you ready for this? The oldest to transition is 68. So those of you who think this is just happening among the young, it's not quite accurate to say that. The median is 20 and the mean is 24. That's in the groups, N of 91, you know what I mean, in this snapshot. And I think it's startling. I think it's a startling piece of information that I don't think I'm seeing many people talk about this. Now, the age to detransition on the other side of the slide. So imagine the minimum age to transition is 13, while the minimum age to detransition is 18. Yeah. I think one of them is 17, actually, now I think about it, so, okay. But anyway, 17 or 18. And then the oldest age to detransition is the 85-year-old. But the mean and the median is 27, the mean is 34. You'll see in the slides I'm about to show that people are remaining in transition for some years. I know people often say 5 to 7 years. It looks a bit longer than that to me. I think I'm aware that that's not good news, but it seems to me to be a little bit longer than that. It depends. It looks like females, and I know Lisa Lippman did some research on this, looks like females detransition faster than males. Arguably, there's all sorts of reasons for that. So there's some details. Age to begin transition is from 13 to 68. Years in transition, do you see that slide? The average age is the average is 9 years in transition, but a range of 1 to 36 years. So some of them have stayed for decades in transition. And they say to me, you know, within 2 years I regretted it. And I prevaricated because I thought I'd gone too far, because I had gone too far and I didn't know how to get back. Loads of them, just so you know, say, I detransitioned for a year or two. It was too hard. It was just too hard. I was too lonely. I was just made an ostracized part of society. I just went back into transition because it was easier. Now with hopefully these communities that we're creating, now I would hope that they would stumble into these meetings, and they do stumble in because you can see them looking around going, this is wild. Do you know what I mean? That they'll start to think, no, there is a community, there is a way forward, because these are people who transitioned in their 80s and 90s, the 1980s and 1990s. They had nobody. They were on their own, silently, so many of them silently stopped transitioning, and then a couple of years later just went back in. You know what I mean? I would say very like alcoholism or drug addiction. It's just too hard. Real life is too hard. I'm going back in. And then if you look at it, the age to detransition, the average age is about 27. The average age is 34. The median is 27. And anything from 18 to 85. And years since, some of them just arrived in, oh my God, I better hurry up. Some of them arrive in literally they're weeks into their detransition. Some detransitioned 34 years ago. And they come into their meetings going, I've never met any other detransitioners, so I'm just, you know what I mean? So there's an extraordinary thing happening in this, you know what I mean? I better hurry it up. As you could imagine, I could talk about this forever. It's fascinating data. So if you look at the different ages here, so let's say in the blue graph, 13 to 15, that's a small number who transitioned at that age. Then a high number transitioned between 16 and 20. Another high number between 20 to 25. But then there's the older transitioners. Do you see? From 26 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, 51 to 68. These are people who kind of got in on the trans phenomenon, especially in recent years, and thought, yeah. And some of them come to our meeting saying, I think I might transition and I'm 40. You know what I mean? And then the age to detransition, yeah, there it is, 17. I knew there was 17. There's a detransitioner who detransitioned at 17 in our meetings. She's over 18 now, but it's extraordinary to go through. You've gone through medical transition and detransition, and you're not yet 18. It's an extraordinary concept. And you see the ages of detransition, they go quite late. You know, there's loads between 21 and 25 and loads between 26 and 30. But then later on, there's a consistent people who are in their 50s, people who are in their 60s. And they all have phrases. We really need to work on the phrases. Transition isn't a correct word. Detransitioned isn't a correct word. You know what I mean? They're not transitioning and they're not detransitioning. Some of them say, I lived in the trans delusion. Or I lived in transition. I no longer live in transition. I got off the crazy train. We've got lots of phrases. Here's a few phrases from the detransitioner. My life was on hold when I was living in transition. My parents are angry at me. I avoid them. I cause them hell. My body wants to have been left alone. My body is kicking off with all of this medicalisation. It's taboo to be negative about trans, but it ruined my life. When I was starting to detransition, I experimented with femininity in secret. And my trans identity, so many have said this, my trans identity protected me. I'm afraid to live without my shield. Yeah. So I'm going to flick over some because I don't want to, like I say, it's all out in the poster outside. Yeah. They're saying thank you and I'm ignoring them. Well, this is hot off the press, this information. So then I'm on the way out though. So this is kind of interesting. Do you see how long it is? Like 11 of the people who disclosed, they spent 1 to 5 years in transition. Then the majority spent 6 to 10 years in transition. And then a small number spent a huge level of years in transition. And then some of them, like I say, detransitioned many years ago. And I love when they come in because they can often give real hope to the people who detransitioned last week. They're like, you know what, this used to be the biggest thing in my life. And it's like a boat that went out into the ocean. It's just not that big a feature anymore. But a lot of them now, the medical complications, and I know there's some organisations that Medical Trans Resilience Network, Health Resilience Network, but there are organisations that are trying to give help to physical complications of detransitioners, sorely needed. They have a lot of, and the doctors don't know what to say to them. The doctors can't give them help. And as one person said, I remember one person who said something along the lines of, medically transitioned as a child, was given a mastectomy when I didn't have breasts, but it was to stop because I had been puberty blocked. But it was just to stop the idea that there would be ever any future growth. And then, let's say you're in your 20s and you realise it's all been a mistake, and as a lot of them said, I don't know what it is to put estrogen into my body because I never had estrogen because I was puberty blocked. And I've had testosterone for 20 years. And I'm a walking experiment, and I'm in chronic pain, and I'm not convinced that I should put in estrogen into my body that doesn't have ovaries. Do you know what I mean? So we're in extraordinary territory with those sort of concepts. And so, like, just a last few quotes here. People assume I'm an egg and I'm going to transition. The doctor explained being trans as a neurological condition. My consent form has drawings of rainbows on it. I was a baby, really. They rolled out the red carpet for me when I transitioned. I outsourced my autonomy and authority to my therapist. The therapists come out really badly in these meetings. It was sold to me as a way to disappear into society. I didn't feel I had, this is somebody who didn't detransition. Quite a few of the older ones don't detransition until they retire. And one of them, I didn't feel I had the right or wherewithal to expose my patients to my chaos. Do you know what I mean by detransitioning? I didn't feel I could impose that upon people. And so I'm nearly on the end now. The geographical location, mostly in North America, some in Europe and some in other, there's the different countries. And like I say, it's all out in the poster. I'm not going to take questions because I ran over. But I'm talking to everybody, so you can come up and ask me any questions you want. And let me see. Please help us. Please consider funding this. We would love to pay the therapists. We would really love to pay therapists and roll out many of these meetings. And we don't have any funding for this particular thing at all. We did have it, and we gave it to, the one-to-one therapy, and now we don't. But we think it's the most valuable service. We run loads of things in Genspect. This is the one that I think is really, really, really helping people in a very practical way. Thank you very much.